Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
I was getting a very strange feedback thing going on there, Radar. Is
Hello,
this?
hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
I've got a very
I was
strange
getting a
feedback
very
thing going on there, Radar. Is this?
Hello, hello, hello.
We
Okay.
could. It's
I've
like
got
we're
a
buskers.
feedback
We could
thing
loop this and
Radar.
then
Is
talk
this?
over ourselves.
Hello, hello.
We
Okay.
could. It's
I've
like
got
we're
a
buskers.
feedback
We could
thing
loop this and
Radar.
then
Is this?
talk over ourselves. We
This
could.
is quite
It's
bizarre.
like
What's
we're
going on?
buskers. We could loop this and
Radar.
then
Is this?
talk over ourselves.
I have no
We could-
idea what's going
It's
on.
like
What's
we're
going on?
buskers. We could loop this and
Radar.
then
Is this?
talk over ourselves.
I have no
We could-
idea what's going
It's
on.
like
What's
we're
going on?
buskers. Because now it's just really like it's not like it's an echo.
I have no idea what's going on.
It's just a loop. Because now it's just really like
Okay.
it's not like it's an echo.
I have no idea what's going on.
It's just a loop. Because now it's just really like
Okay.
it's not like it's an echo.
I have no idea what's going on.
It's just a loop. Because now it's just really like
Okay.
it's not like it's an echo.
This
It's just
is a good
loop.
live stream.
Because now it's just really yeah.
Okay.
It's not like it's an
Hang on.
echo. It's just
This is a good
loop.
live stream.
Now it's
Hang
just
on.
really
Hang on.
yeah.
Bear with me here. Hang on. Bear with me. Bear with me.
It's
This
just
is a good
loop.
live stream.
Now it's
Got it. Bingo. Hey, Radar.
good. Hi.
I know what was happening. Do you want to know what was happening?
Yeah, because there'll be people watching this who it may happen for them in the future. And this will be one of those little hacks where you go, it's like the one where a friend of mine bought a great big, wonderful new barbecue the other day, secondhand, paid $1.50 for it because the guy thought the regulator wasn't working. But people turn their gas on too fast with the barbecues. If you just turn it on slowly, they work.
So what
So
was
that's one of those
happening
life hacks.
was
Tell me what happened.
I had set up something before, and I'd set up the live stream, and I checked on the live stream to see if we were there, and the live stream was still open. So what happened was we started, and then the live stream started after us, and it started playing back, and then it started playing back. So I shut down that window, shut down that live stream, and now we're here. Woohoo! This is what professionals would never do, but we're here, Radar. How are you, man?
Well, that's because they have a team
Yeah,
who sit behind them and make sure that when it does happen, they can sit there and they go, well, it's nothing to do with me.
I have a team. You want to see my team?
Yeah.
Here's my team.
Hey, nice.
My little team. She's just down there having a sleep. You right, mate?
Oh, it's a lot like I did earlier this afternoon.
Okay, sorry, that really threw me for a second, but we're here now and we're good to go. Radar, kia ora, welcome. How are you, man? Doing well?
I don't know. I went to the doctor for my checkup today and now I'm just really anxious.
Really? What kind? Is this like a regular
blood
thing?
pressure was slightly high.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's supposed to be regular.
Yeah.
But I haven't done it for a couple of years because, COVID. And then I had slightly high blood pressure and now it's made me really anxious. It's like
what does high blood pressure tell you? Because blood pressure is about the blood going away and coming back. And if it's higher, does that mean that the blood's more struggling to get around the body? What does it actually mean? I don't actually know.
I think so, yeah. And then it turns out, I think in the States, they've changed the criteria as to where you sit.
Yeah.
Because, look, I'm just going to say it. They might want to sell more medication.
Yeah.
So, if you bring the threshold down, people are going to freak out a little bit more, going to purchase more medication at an earlier stage. Or maybe they're just right.
Cool, man. Yeah, no, I try and do that twice a year. I try and go do bloods and stuff twice a year just to have a bit of a checkup. My old man got prostate cancer, I think at about 60, but they got it nice and early. So I'm like, I mean, I'm not 50 yet, but I just go along every once in a while and get a checkup. I probably haven't done it for a year. I'm probably due one just to check the water and oil, so to
Yeah.
speak, radar,
Yeah.
just to see how things are going.
Exactly right. Because a few years ago, something did get picked up, knock it on the head.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Get
good, man.
checked.
How's life and work and stuff at the moment? I mean, we're coming out of this we're going to talk a bit about COVID a bit later on, but coming out of coming out of that, well, not really, but sort of somewhat. But I guess what I'm saying is live performances, productions are all kind of restarting up again. What's going on?
Yeah,
for you?
they're restarting. April, which has just been, was probably the quietest month in the whole of the pandemic. I think what happened was you had people January, February needing to make a call. They didn't know what was going on.
Yep.
And everyone just abandoned April, at least in my calendar. So it was incredibly quiet. But cracking back into it this week, awards, conferences, it's all going. People and one of the conference organizers today was that, she said people just really want to get back in a room with each other.
Any plans to head off to Antarctica and do like a 10-part television series or anything?
No, I did go to Rotorua for a holiday.
There you go. Just as good.
And I tell you what, the luge, amazing. But for the first time since the pandemic, it was back to a state where you went, this would have been a normal, busy pre-pandemic day. It was packed up, the luge,
Wow.
and you kind of went, oh, right, this is what life was like. Queues.
I see. I saw a headline probably last weekend about traffic on Auckland's motorway returns to pre-pandemic levels. So I think people are just getting on with it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you don't really have a choice, do we?
We do not.
Can't
What we
sit
do
home
have a
till it's gone
choice
away.
about, though, is what to talk about tonight. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to be talking a little bit about COVID. We might talk about the emissions in the car. It's like Oprah. You get an EV. You get an EV. Everybody gets an EV. From the government, and also the Chloe Swarbrick documentary that was announced today. We are going to have a bit of a chat about that, maybe one or two other things as well. But where we're going to start is we're going to bring a guest on. It's fantastic that someone is available to have a chat to us in such a late night, Radar. So late at night, we still get people to come and have a chat with us. Dr. James Hollings is an associate professor and program leader at the journalism paper. I guess it's the School of Journalism at Massey University. James, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us. You'll need to just unmute your mic there, James.
Unmute.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Unmuted.
Good morning.
How are
Good
you?
evening. Good
Good to
evening
be
to you.
here.
Thank you for joining us. How are you? You doing
Pretty
well,
good.
James?
How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Look, thank you very much
Yeah.
for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us some time. You're here for a really specific reason, and it's a little bit to talk to the idea around journalism in New Zealand based on a story that came out today by David Farrier. The first thing we'll do, if people haven't seen this, and most people have seen this, it's been going around everywhere, but what we want to do is talk a bit about the actual story itself, and then have a bit of a chat about what it means and how the journalism does work and how journalism should work, and would love to get your input in that as an academic who, I guess, the School of Journalism does journalism courses, trains journalisms to go out for the future. So that's what we're going to have a chat about. So thank you very much for for joining us. So as I think most people are aware, if you're not, but we'll let you in, David Farrier broke the story about Arise churches in New Zealand and what was going on. He wrote a story today talking about other media outlets picking up on his story and running with them. Now, David says in his article today, his post today, he's not necessarily, and I don't know if he uses the word plagiarism, but he's basically saying no one's plagiarizing him, but a lot of people are using his content, his work, his research, his legwork, and they are jumping off the back of it and doing their own stories. I want to read a little bit from the story, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about it. So David talks about him writing about Arise, and then there being a 10 to 14 day delay, and then the major media outlets in New Zealand following up with the same stories, about a 10 to 2 week delay. David says in his article, this wasn't a giant surprise because New Zealand newsrooms have a very unique thing where they hate crediting other outlets or people for the stories they're reporting on. Instead, they almost act like they are in another dimension altogether, another universe, the universe occupied by One News on April 14, which is 2 weeks after he started the his investigation, existed in an alternate timeline where Arise Church had decided out of the blue to examine their own abhorrent behavior. In the universe Webworm, and that's David's Substack, if people aren't aware, in the universe Webworm existed in, and Webworm readers existed in, Arise Church had no alternative but to launch an inquiry because Webworm, me and co-writer Hayden Donnell, had written about the disgusting ways they were treating people. So James, would like to know from you, I guess within the world of journalism, where sort of attribution should come in, where attribution starts, where plagiarism comes in, and how the New Zealand media should be handling this, what is ethical, what is unethical, what's a bit on the nose, and what David's been talking about.
Yeah, hi. Well, just before, I've just been brushing up on this. Just ahead of my students, as you always do. Anyway, I was just browsing through the Stuff Editorial Code of Practice and NZME Editorial Code of Practice. The NZME Editorial Code of Practice specifically prohibits plagiarism. NZME Stuff, of course, also says that we respect the copyright laws. And under copyright law, journalism is copyright. So if I write a story, if you write a story and I just copy it word for word, that's breaching your copyright. And you can take me to the Copyright Tribunal. And, in extreme circumstances, there are pretty substantial penalties for doing that. And what they can do, of course, is what's called fair use, which means that they can quote from your article. They can take bits of it for news purposes. So news reporting is exempt from the Copyright Act, so in the sense that you can quote from something quite substantially if it's what's called, well, in other jurisdictions it would be called fair use. New Zealand doesn't specifically have that, but you can quote quite substantially because you need to report what's going on. So it's often said you can't copyright ideas. So TV New Zealand would probably say, well, David Ferrier can't copyright the idea of what's happening or the fact of what's happening. But there's no doubt that he can copyright his own article as the way he expressed it as copyright. And at the very least, TV New Zealand and everyone else should have acknowledged that he was the first person to report that. That would be a simple, fair, decent thing to do. But it does happen quite frequently. He's quite right that some news media from time to time just rips off something written somewhere else and doesn't acknowledge that someone else reported it.
I think David's been pretty clear that he's not saying that there's any kind of plagiarism going on or copyright violations. He's more talking, I think, about when he does the work, when he breaks the story, and then other people pick it up. What would you be teaching your journalist students about attribution to that? I mean, it could be fair use. It is a story that's out there. If someone wrote a story about an All Black win, someone else could write that story, but his is sort of a breaking news. No one else had the story. He was the first. Ethically speaking, like I was thinking about it today. I'm not even saying it's unethical, but I was saying it feels like it's not cricket. It's somewhere not lesser than not unethical, but a bit more than kind of fair play. It's somewhere in the middle there where they haven't broken any rules or laws, but they're kind of going, here's our story, not saying that all these other people have done the work in it. Because what I thought was all these outlets that are now using or writing their own independent stories based on the original story from David are, making money on pre-rolls, on advertising, on getting eyes there for longer. And if he sees nothing for that, that's what it kind of just feels a bit off to me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's totally off, and it's actually foolish, really, because they're ultimately lying to their readers and breaching their trust. And Stuff has got a big thing at the moment about building trust with its audience. And how can you build trust when you're pretending to be the exclusive on something when everyone, well, at least quite a lot of people know that someone else got it first? David Ferrier got it first. So
I mean, it's pretty simple, really, isn't it? And you simply put
exclusive because they
in
haven't
one
read it.
line that says,
Everywhere else.
in a story originally investigated by
I
David
fully
Ferrier,
agree
or
with you that
Pat Brittenden, or who it may have been.
With it.
I think we've got a little bit of an internet delay there, James. Are you still with us? Are you still here? Oh, you're back again. You guys were just crossing over
Yeah,
each
I
other
am,
a little bit there. But Radar was talking about just one line. And actually in this article by David, he mentions his colleague Dylan Reeves suggested an easy solve for all over on Twitter. He said, the event initially reported on David Farrier's webworm was independently verified by witnesses spoken to by RNZ, who went on to elaborate on their experience. So that one line, like you're saying, Radar, the event initially reported on David Farrier's webworm, to me would kind of cover this whole thing off and make it feel a bit more fair play. From your work as an academic, James, from your work in the area of teaching, how does it feel to you that the New Zealand media treat one another? I've always looked to the American media, and I used to think about David Letterman and those late night shows, how they will have someone from, it doesn't matter the channel they're on, it doesn't matter what they're publicizing, it doesn't matter if they're a competition, network or their own network, they'll have them on because it's all about content. For a long time in New Zealand, it's felt like, TVNZ will stay separate from TV3 from Prime. That's changing a bit now when we see people, especially comedians, Radar, jumping from like 7 days to, to Dancing with the Stars or whatever. But there seems to have been in the media world in New Zealand this ardent desire not to cross over. I don't know, for fear of what? That you might give some exposure to a competitor. Is that a fair assessment from the New Zealand industry, do you think, James? And do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I think there is quite a bit of that. You're quite right. I mean, you've observed it. It would be foolish to pretend otherwise. And but you talk about Letterman.
Yeah, I think we've got another internet problem here, Radar.
We have.
Are you still with us, James? We'll try one more time. We just seem to have a bit of a delay in
yes.
internet there. Sorry about that, sir. It seems to be breaking up. We lost you when you said you're talking about Letterman. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, well, can you hear me right now?
Yep, I can get you now.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you were talking about Letterman. That's sort of, in the top end of the US media, where everyone's, some parts of it is pretty polite and all that fair dealing and everything else. But there's a lot of very feral American media that just rip off everyone else, just as so in the way that you're talking about some parts of New Zealand as well. But yeah, I think you're right about there's a tendency in New Zealand media to be quite not very open at times, but there's some parts that are quite responsible as well. So I wouldn't be sort of generalizing too much, frankly.
Yeah. Hey, well, look, James, we'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us some time this evening. I know it's late and we've had a couple of internet problems there, but we really do appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us to expand on that a little bit more. Radio, I'll just also throw up there one more quick thing before we go on from this. David actually mentioned on that whole talking about other networks that he went on the project to talk about his product on Netflix, right? Dark Tourist. And when he went on the project, he says, I remember when I did a live appearance on TV3 as a project to promote Dark Tourist, I was specifically asked not to mention Netflix. I'm not kidding, says David Farrier.
Look, I can well understand that. It's a small market here, and it's an us versus them. When I was doing stuff on TV NZ, I remember John Bridges, told me that they had the list of people they might have up on 7 days, and I think from memory, he actually sent me a little phone message of him rubbing my name off the wall because that was part of the MediaWorks stable. And so, when you've got these stables of talents in New Zealand and you're investing in that talent and they're a part of your brand and you want people to buy into those personalities and use them to bring them to your channel, I can understand that. It's a lot different now. If you have a look now, you've got Paul Ego and various others that are both on 7 days and they're on Have You Been Paying Attention? There's a lot of cross-channel changes now. But there are others who are still very much those news anchors and things like that. They are resolutely within their lane.
I wonder if those news anchors, though, I mean, Sunday is TVNZ, isn't it? Like, what if Mike May Roberts had a program had an interview on Sunday? Could that crossover happen now, do you think, in this media landscape we live in?
I don't know that it would with current affairs.
Right. Different. Yeah?
I think it does with entertainment. they're clamoring for that entertainment sector, but I think they like to keep things really branded. Not that I'm watching a lot of current affairs on television at the moment. But, as I say, it does seem kind of weird when you're promoting a television show and one of the questions is going to be, where can we see your show?
Yeah. Don't say Netflix.
I can't tell you.
I wonder if one of the changes in the entertainment world between 3 and Di Henwood's doing the Lego show right now on TVNZ, and I would assume he's still a captain on 7 Days as well on TV3. Two pretty big.
Well, no, I think they've got rid of their captains.
Oh, okay.
I know there was a big reshuffle and they brought in a lot of whole new faces and things.
Okay.
So I think the captains have gone. I'm not
Okay.
sure whether he is. I'm sure he is. I know he's certainly not, obviously can't do Dancing with the Stars because he's gone over to the Lego Masters. So again, those high profile people, they like to keep them in their little cocoon.
Yeah, I got to say as well, part of the reason I want to talk about this tonight is I've experienced this in the last couple of weeks in a very, very minor way. The reason I'm leaving it right to the end of the chat about this is I'm not trying to compare us to the amazing work that David Farrier's done, but I did an interview on this show, actually, on BHN with someone about Gloria Vale, and someone who I know personally who spent time 6 years undercover doing work to help get people out of Gloria Vale. It's an amazing story. Go and look it up. You'll find it. And the thing is, Stuff then did a story, and I actually told some outlets about it. So I said, there's this thing, you can use it if you want. You can use my content. You can put my content on your site. You can use it as a source, yada, yada, yada. And Stuff then went and wrote an article and didn't mention me at all. Or didn't mention the source at all. This was the original article. Now, I thought, oh, well, that's a bit on the nose. Some kind of attribution would have been good, even though they've used their own content. I got told today by the subject matter of my interview that part of the interview that they did was actually quotes out of my interview. Now, Stuff has challenged that and said that's not the case, which is fine. But I did say to them, look, I wasn't a dick about it. I just said, look, again, your story is because of my story. Your story is now getting mirrored on other sites. And my story was the reason that yours is there. You're now earning, your Stuff is now earning from the story that I gave you, and you've done, you haven't mentioned us at all. To their credit, and I'm just going to bring up exactly the same story, but a later iteration of it. Later on this evening, they decided to put my story, embed my article into their story. Now, it's a nice gesture if you're talking about exposure and talking about eyes on what we do. I mean, not to sound like a dick again, but it could be a little bit too late, too little too late, because, that was 5 days ago, and who's going to read a Stuff article from 5 days ago? But it's just the thing that made me think, I'm not saying they did anything wrong, but I'm like, if you use something, it's like saying thank you. You thank your neighbor.
Look, I think you summed it up before when you said it's just not cricket.
Yeah,
Come on, it's too small. And give someone a bit of gravy, Hey, say, look, this is a story broken by this bit of indie media out there. Despite the aspirations that you may have, you're no financial threat to Stuff. It's not going to hurt their revenue stream to say, hey, look, here's this cool thing that's breaking these stories. I'm really just interested now, and I must go back and see the story on how you spend 6 years undercover.
Yeah.
Like, what, infiltrating Gloria Vale, or like pretending to be a milk truck driver?
Yeah, no, it's Olivia Wednesday.
They do.
If you go and have a look at look at me trying to search while I'm doing stuff. Hang on, I can do this.
Because now I've got life goals.
There.
I want to go undercover.
I'll do this. So this is the DOC studios. That's where we play all these things. If you go into there and you go to the videos, that one there, 740 views at the moment. And a local police officer in Gloriavale talked to the undercover person, Olivia, and they referenced Gloriavale as New Zealand's biggest crime scene. That's how a local police officer out that way talked about it. So she spent 6 years going undercover. She wouldn't give exact details as to how, but I think kind of putting on a facade as to them being religious people and being local people and stuff, and wanting to come in and have a look around and attend the concerts and stuff that they're doing.
There's got to be a movie. Hey, it's like if they don't have producers sniffing around, there's got to be a doco in there somewhere.
Well, in doing that,
also interesting. I'm not sure whether it was part of your story, but I see that the Labor ruling has come out as well, that child labour, all of that, and they're now looking at, so I think Westland Milk and various others are looking at not purchasing their product anymore. They're looking at the contract to say, how can we not buy your milk anymore? And other people are saying, we don't want to buy your bread, because you're basically using kids as slave labour. So it's all fallen apart for the cult of Gloria Vale.
Well, that was how we started. That's why we talked about it. And I just connected with someone who had done this thing. They spent this time going backwards and forwards of the place over 6 years. They befriended someone, and in the end, they helped get that person and her mother out. So it was pretty cool. It's like I know a superhero officially because of that.
I'm not living my best life.
Hey, we're talking journalism. Let's talk one other thing about journalism before we move on. But it's a bit different with this one. I want to thank again, Dr. James for coming on. Dr. James Hollings from Massey University. I think we just had a technical glitch there, and we just needed to move on. So if James has seen any of this, apologies to him. But I wanted to give him his dues, but also not make it lag for him or people who are watching as well. Now, a huge story at the moment is about cost of living. Everyone's talking about cost of living on many levels. They don't want to talk about anything else. The other day there was a radio announcer talking about we shouldn't be talking about climate change at all. We should just be talking about cost of living. Like, it seems to be a highlight and a focus of everybody. I think this is fascinating from NZ Herald. Right, NZ Herald has done a really good article about countdown versus foodstuffs, what's cheaper, where to buy from, and they've really gone into detail about a loaf of bread, value range, New World. Look, all these numbers and all these bits and pieces that would be really helpful for people who are there's listed numbers, dollars, comparisons. If you're someone who's really struggling with the cost of living, it's a really good article, right? However, it's behind the paywall, which they have every right to do. They have every right to put it behind the paywall. It's their business model. But I just kind of wanted to ask the question, if this article would be best to help the most vulnerable in the country, the people who are the ones who actually need the help for cost of living, but it's behind a paywall, which, let's be honest, is going to be the people who are best off in the country, who can afford to pay $200 a year for a subscription. I just wanted to go, that seems a bit ironic to me, kind of like 10,000 spoons when all you need is a knife.
Yeah, I mean, far be it from me to say that it's, if you do have one of these subscriptions and you do want to get that information out, you could live your best life by screen grabbing it and publicizing it. But as you say, look, and we emailed about this earlier in the day, said I'd play the devil's advocate and say, well, look, they do have a business model. It's not free to produce this kind of news. Someone's gone to research it. When they do get, the irony about all of this, of course, is when they do get government money to make sure that there's reporting from the provinces and around stories that might not be profitable, they're immediately branded as government lackeys in the lamestream media and all of that. So it's a sort of a lose-lose situation. I would imagine they would keep that story behind the paywall for a short period of time and then open it up, surely, to drive a little bit of traffic through. But the cost of living thing, I don't know whether you saw today that the head of the Bank of England was talking about the apocalyptic rise of food prices that is coming, and listed things, wheat, vegetable oil, things like that. And with this sort of admittedly Daily Mail-esque use of the word apocalyptic rise in price, things are going to get pretty tight out there.
No, look, and to be honest with you, I had that same ponderance radar about, so I checked again tonight because I thought, I wonder if it's behind the paywall in the morning, but I don't want to go in the evening and go, it's behind a paywall, and it wasn't anymore. So I did refresh it sort of an hour ago, and it was still behind the paywall then. But you might be right, and as you say, completely entitled to do whatever they want with their business model. But I don't know, there's so much free content on all these websites that have paywalls. I'm just wondering what the decision to be made about that particular article. I mean, look, I don't want to be too much of a dick, and because there's 90% of their other articles aren't behind the paywall. But I just wonder what the reasoning behind that one in particular is. Is it because everyone wants to know, so it forces people to go behind the paywall? Is it a service to the public? Where does service to the public, fourth estate kick in, and paywall profit making business kick in? Where is that line? You know what I mean?
I often find it hard to see what is behind the paywall. I never really pay attention to it because I just had a sort of a sphincter clenching moment the other day where I suddenly went, "What's that? $199 on my credit card?" Where the subscription to the Herald had renewed, and it was like, "Oh, sure." I really did kind of go, "Oh, yeah, that is a lot." But as I say, when you are subscribed, it is kind of sometimes hard to see what's behind the paywall and what's not because things just click through anyway. So.
Yeah.
You know,
I typically
and
go
I
to
know
the-
there are people, we've all seen those cries, there's Mike Hoskins or someone writes a terrible column and it's, "Oh, cancel your subscription to the Herald." But for every one of those, there's some other really great columns. Simon Wilson's writing some fantastic stuff at the moment. I'm happy to pay for that, and subscribe. And again, that choice that we have of subscribing, you can subscribe if you like what David Farrier is doing. Subscribe to that. Do you have a
Yeah.
subscription thing? What do you got? A Patreon or somewhere people can give you a
I
little?
don't have,
throw some
for a
coins?
while, see up here, see this one?
Yeah.
This is I have a coffee brand which I haven't launched properly yet, but
Is it those 4 bags of coffee?
I've got a that's my coffee brand, Beardy Boy Coffee.
Great.
I haven't actually launched it yet. It's because of the pandemic, and I've got a local roaster in Dunedin who's going to do it. And my plan is probably going to be, rather than go Patreon, if you're a coffee drinker, buy your coffee off us. It's going to be a similar price. It might, let's be honest, might be a little bit more expensive. But if you buy it from a cafe, if you buy it from us, it gets delivered to your door. And what we will get is about a Patreon-sized amount of profit on that, like a $5 or
Right.
$8 profit. That's sort of one of my
No,
ideas.
I'm thinking of your business model here with coffee, and I'm looking at the discussion around climate change big this week, and the fact that actually it may mean the end of coffee, amongst many other things. Get in now.
Mm.
You want to launch
Yeah.
that Pat, before coffee becomes, when is the price of that going to go up? And what's going to happen to those little businesses that, people will put their hands in their pocket and they'll pay $5 for a coffee? I remember in Dunedin 30 years ago, I said I'd never pay more than $5 for a jug of beer.
Right.
What is it now? I don't even
I
know.
don't.
So,
I don't do a lot of drinking out, a little pub drinking out, but I do get a fright every now and again when I may have you buy a dozen beers on special for $14, kind of $14 to $20 for a dozen beers from a wholesaler from the supermarket, and then you go out into town and you get a glass of beer at $11. I'm just like, it does shock me sometimes.
It's cheap, and there was a thing a couple of days ago around the glasses of wine. We got caught out like that. We went to it was a great idea. It was a pub quiz for kids. So family orientated. They said my wife was getting a glass of wine. They said, "Would you like a big one?" She said yes. And when I went to pay the bill, I think that glass of wine cost $24. And I was like, "What? Like that's more than the bottles we drink." I think it went from a $12 glass of wine. It's you didn't get twice as much, but it suddenly doubled. And it's like, hey, you probably want to warn people.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? When you get something at a restaurant and all of a sudden you realize it's 3 times the amount you thought it was going to be. Whose fault is that, though? I guess they should say. I don't know.
Hey, look, this is one that's vexed me today.
Yeah,
I'm going to segue to it because we're talking about media. You were talking about Dark Tourist earlier on. That was made by Mark McNeil at Razor Films. I see Razor Films have also, with another director, got some funding to make a documentary about Chloe Swarbrick, which has ruffled feathers. I saw David Seymour complaining that he was not going to get a documentary. Well, he wasn't complaining that he wasn't going to get a documentary made about him. To be fair, I would watch a doco about David Seymour, or Te Pāti Māori, or whoever it may be. I guess the question is, and the question that's been raised is, is this a suitable use of taxpayer-funded money? For which I would argue, yes. We're having a real issue at the moment with representation. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a woman, in particular, in Parliament at this point in time, and particularly over the next couple of years that this doco is going to be filmed? I think it's going to be really eye-opening, and what a great person to take us through this. As I say, I would also watch one on David. What does it mean to be in act at this point in time coming through? I'd watch it on Nicola Willis or anyone like that as well. So I'm all for this. And as they say, now you've suddenly got this thing where New Zealand On Air, which has funded this, entirely independent. There's always been this cry that they must remain independent, and suddenly you've got all these politicians coming in and going, no, you can't fund that. Well, they made their choice. TV3's a broadcaster. They would have had to put some money into it too, I would imagine. So, this is all above board as far as I can see, Pat.
All right. Well, let's have a look at a bit of the story that was released today. If people haven't caught up on this yet, what people have been saying about it.
A little rain not stopping the show today.
Oh, you're all wearing the right colours. Look at this.
But the popular Green MP is coming under fire after a government agency dished out $200,000 of taxpayer money to make a documentary about her life.
Like most politicians, when asked to participate in a piece of local media, I said yes.
It will be the third recent documentary on this.
Just a little side point, not meaning to sound bitter. Every time we've approached Chloe to participate in a little bit of local media, she said no. Just a little bit of side point, just a little bit. Other Greens been fantastic. Had Marama 3 or 4 times, had Ricardo on, had James Shaw on, but just
Warbrick made with NZ On Air funding. There was this short doco called OK Chloe.
Okay, Boomer.
Next was 3 Ticks Chloe. Now, being Chloe is on the way.
I think it's outrageous to have taxpayer money from a government agency making a video that's a 2-hour feature-length film with the name of a politician running for office in it.
I like Chloe. It's not about Chloe per se. It's actually fundamentally about, it just doesn't feel right that you should have, a sitting MP being a focus of a major documentary.
I think that it would be entirely remiss of anybody who believes that we should have this independent state funder that is making these decisions independently to all of a sudden start having the state dictate what sort of New Zealand content is made and what sort of New Zealand content is not.
So a couple of things, yeah. To me,
Which versus the attribution, we'll attribute that wonderful clip to TVNZ. Thank you, One News.
to me, this is almost from everybody politicking at its highest. Because if you flip everything, let's say it is now the thing with Chloe, right? I much like you, I'd love to see this documentary. It sounds really interesting. I think it'll be interesting to watch. However, you could also say someone who is about to have not feature length, but third documentary made about them, who is sitting in Parliament, who every one of the documentaries that get made does raise their profile, does portray them, I would say from Chloe's point of view, normally in quite a good light, because she's quite a good person, got all that. If it was the other way, if it was Christopher Luxon having his third one, I think that the oppositional parties, Seymour and Luxon, you would find Ardern and Marama Fox saying exactly the same thing about Christopher Luxon having a documentary made about him coming out just after the election. So I really do see this as politicking from everyone at its finest. You know, Chloe was saying this is an independent group, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if it was on Christopher Luxon, I wouldn't be surprised. No one can predict, parallel universes, if the Greens were saying this is an inappropriate spend of money, having it done on Christopher Luxon. So I don't take any of this too seriously. I think all of them in together are all kind of playing the role they are. The Greens are going to benefit from this. Chloe's going to benefit from this. The opposition are annoyed by it. Other way around, the National would benefit from it, and Labour and the Greens would be annoyed by it. It's just, nah.
The access is going to be fascinating, and as I say, the issues as well. I would very much like to see, one about those other parties too. I think it would be really fascinating, just to reveal to people, and in some ways, how impotent a lot, politicians are once they actually get into power and they've got their fingers on the levers. The levers become impossible to move, and we've seen that this week. Actually, just before we came on, I had a look. There was a thread by Julianne Genter to say, hey, look, I know a lot of you are up. I'm paraphrasing, got a terrible memory. Essentially saying, I know a lot of you are upset about the climate stuff that was released this week. Look, this is the best that we could do in the situation we got. We're happy that we even got to here. How, there are, when you want to make these decisions, there are thousands of people involved in them, public servants, business, interest groups, lobby groups. You've got to get the best you can get and then try to get more next time. It was never going to be what everybody wanted.
Yeah. No, look,
but
fair.
It's better than nothing.
And we are going to talk a bit about
some
that
other
as well.
parties are offering.
Before we go, but yeah, I've got some stuff on the cars and what's going to happen and who's eligible for what. Before we do that, though, just to finish off the story about the documentary and how I said if it was the other way around, like the Greens are fine with us and they're fine with the independents. If it was the other way around, I don't know if they would be, but this is how the Greens responded to questioning about the documentary.
The Greens aren't concerned they might be getting an unfair advantage.
Those are independent decisions made by an independent organisation. I don't have thoughts that decision is up for them.
Ms Swarbrick's bemused.
It was pretty interesting, given the contrast with the likes of Dancing with the Stars.
Mr Seymour says his primetime twerking was entirely different.
Dancing with the Stars is not funded with taxpayer money.
Being Chloe will come out after the next election. Benedict Collins.
But even
News.
that is politicking because he's. I think that's a lucky break for Mr. Seymour, because to be honest, if Dancing with the Stars was taxpayer funded, was internet funded, is he saying he wouldn't have gone on it? I don't believe that for a second. And I was surprised. I went to the funding decisions, and Dancing with the Stars is not funded by NZ On Air, which surprised me immensely.
No, a lot of those big shows aren't. Then you go, well, are they subsidised in some way by the other programs that surround them on that? Look, no, they're not. And if you want to talk about shameless politicking leading up to an election, I'm not sure quite how far out Dancing with the Stars was from an election. But come on, what's the more shameless politicking, Dancing with the Stars or having a doco that could be, warts and all about a campaign or whatever it may be? I'm looking forward to it.
I also think it's them straight away announcing it's going to be released straight after the election. I think kind of I should alleviate any concerns about favoritism, because Chloe Swarbrick might not be there straight after the eletion. I mean, she probably will be. She'll be on the list. But that's, did you see the Anthony Weiner documentary that he was making during his run when he got kind of kicked out because of his dick pics? He then tried to get back into public office, and during that period, they made a documentary on him. Have you seen that?
No, but I feel as if I should.
I think it's called Weiner, and the ridiculous moment of it was he basically gets caught in the documentary made about his comeback, sending dick pics to minors again, and that ends it all. So just think about this as well. It's not necessarily going to go well for Chloe. If they're authentic and genuine documentary makers, who knows what their end product will be.
Yeah, and we've had some great docos. Campaign from back in the 80s. I made a doco. I'm not going to say it's a great one. I thought it was great. About Destiny Church campaigning when Brian Tamaki, back when he first wanted to run for Parliament. It was one of the most disturbing of all of the work I've done. I'm still disturbed by what I saw during the filming of that.
I've got a comment here from Export 2K13, 2013. There have been previous sitting MPs, including a sitting ACT MP, Donna Huata. Have they had documentaries made on, I guess is what Export is saying. Emperor says, if they really do have an issue about this, then they can ask if this will be declared as a donation to the Greens. Well, I guess the other thing is it's coming out after the election. I think that's a part of the thing that eliminates all those issues. I mean, if something very, 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 very good came out in January and then election was in November, by 3 more Novembers time, that very, 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 very good thing is not going to be contributing to drawing people to the polls for that person, 3 years later. So I think that's a pretty easy way around it.
I encourage more docos about politicians. I think the more we can see what it's like, the better we'll be. Who'd be one? Who'd be a politician, especially at this point in time?
I know. And even though you might ride a wave for a while, I mean, let's be honest, Prime Minister rode a wave through the first part of COVID for the right reasons, for how we were living in this country. And now look what's going on. Now look at, the issues and the stress and you couldn't
thanklessness.
Pay me. You couldn't pay me. You couldn't. I mean, maybe I could, but you couldn't pay me enough. I think it's a horrific life.
And as I say, regardless of who it is, I think it is the perfect time to capture a doco like this, because things have changed. You look at the threats, the what's happening with society, the issues that are coming through. It's going to be fascinating.
All right, let's depress everybody a bit more, Radar. In fact, before I do that, I might have a look at the dog, because that means I don't get quite so depressed. All right, Gil?
Is that dog listening to too much current affairs?
Maybe. She looks pretty stoned, eh? Maybe that's the reason.
Take her off social media.
Yeah, right. So I want to talk a little bit about COVID. And the reason I want to talk about COVID is because there was a news item tonight, and it was talking about COVID. I talked to Michael Plank, one of the COVID modelers, within the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we were talking about COVID and when's it going to end and what's the modeling saying. And he actually said, I am paraphrasing, but what he said was, or it could be the rest of our lives. And I was like, don't fucking say that.
Well, our
Don't
lives might be very short, so that's not so bad.
But he was basically saying it could go on for a very, very, very long time. And then a report has come out today, and not to depress everybody going to bed right now, but talking about, putting up with COVID for the next 5 years.
A gloomy day for a gloomy report. Life 2 years into the pandemic may look relatively normal, but the next 5 years will be far from it.
What we're realising is it's not just a public health crisis, it's a social crisis as well.
A new report compiled by hundreds of international experts lays out 3 scenarios. The most optimistic one requires immediate effort on a global scale to tackle the ongoing effects of COVID-19. But the most likely scenario is that COVID-19 will become endemic, health systems risk collapsing, food security worsens and inequalities grow.
It's not going to
So, not so good radar is what they're saying. Look, we're going to talk about it, but I'll just go through. I've got 3 little clips from the story because it talks about the actual report, and then we'll have at it. They talk in the report about the worst case scenario.
In the worst case scenario, lockdowns will still be needed, causing high levels of harm, and the world faces negative impacts on climate change, education loss, unemployment, terrorism, and political instability, resulting in famine and conflict.
There's going to be a lot more poverty. It's most important that we don't kind of pretend we've licked this thing. We certainly haven't.
Experts
Just quietly, when you're talking about COVID, you shouldn't talk about licking anything. That's just my personal opinion. It's not a good advice about licking
are
anything.
hoping this report will be a wake-up call.
We're absolutely over the pandemic. We want it to have finished yesterday, but it's not doing that. We have to be realistic. I think this report is a huge reality check.
A reality.
And one more third part, just to bring the full cycle of joy to us about this.
I don't know. I feel as if the joy is being sucked out of me. Like you're like a necromancer or whatever they are.
Thanks, man. The report goes on to say, just 20 seconds here, why? This is, I think, an important one. Because, at the start of the pandemic, speaking to epidemiologists, and we've done that a lot on this show, a lot of them say things like, we thought everyone would go inside for a month or 2 and this would all go away. Like that would have put everything would have gone away permanently. And the report comes out and actually explains why this COVID thing is dragging on.
And the report says it's dragging on because governments have failed to tackle the pandemic together on issues like global access to vaccines.
As a result, the virus continues to replicate. We get new variants emerging. And right now, South Africa is into its 5th wave.
We need agencies like WHO and the United Nations having the mandate and resources to get on and do the job of coordinating responses.
So there you go. Radar, 5 more years of this. How do you feel about that, sir?
Well, if we can see 5 more years of this, I'm quite looking forward to it because I literally wake up every morning, flick open the Herald app, for which I have subscribed, and see whether or not there's been a nuclear war in Europe. I'm actually quite anxious about it. But I was trying to think, what happened with the Spanish flu? Like I don't know how long it dragged on for. And then my wife said, well, it killed everybody that it could kill, and then it sort of disappeared. So, I am in no doubt that this is going to continue in one form or another for some period of time. The problem that you're going to have is these calls to bring in WHO and the UN and various others. There's now that kind of kickback against all of those. So where's the social, that kind of ongoing social churn around all of this stuff? Wow, I don't know. What are they going to do? What I do predict, low uptake on this 4th booster, on this new booster that's coming. I would be surprised if people were going to rush out and get that booster. There's a lot of weird booster hesitancy out there at the moment.
Really? See, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
I had a kid at home for a lot of last week with a sore throat. Ended up not being COVID, which was great.
Same.
And I was thinking, one of the reasons I was thinking I hope it's not COVID is that then means if you catch it, you got to wait 3 months to get the next shot. There was a story the other week about how nurses are being stood down because they can't have their booster because they caught COVID. Now they have to wait 3 months to get their booster. But I was thinking about getting a fourth one. I'm like, I mean, if it's available and it's there, I mean, unless you're saying there's a new different one, but if it's just the Pfizer one again, I mean,
No. I think, people have. There's been a lot of chit chat around people that I've bumped into around the country around kind of, that the booster and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to be banged up with anything. Get into it. Don't mind, but who knows? And of course, I suppose one of the benefits is this current variation that's going around isn't. I mean, people are dying, but not a lot of people. And so people go, oh, it was just a bad cold. See, it was just a bad cold, like we said all along, which is just nonsense.
And the thing that people aren't talking about very much, we had Dr. Anna Brooks on last Friday from Auckland University.
You're going to use the phrase long COVID?
Her research is in long COVID. And her also, what's not happening is we're not talking about reinfection. So I know people who, and I empathize with this completely, who are like, oh, it's just time. If we're going to get it, why don't we get it now? And I'm like, Emperor, who's watching us right now, has told us that she got COVID twice in 6 weeks. And we're seeing people getting COVID within like 5 or 6 weeks of having it the first time. So now they used to say 3 months and then 3 to 6 months it wanes. What it seems at the moment, not giving medical advice, make that clear, but it seems that at the moment there's a 4-week window where you're kind of a superhero. And then from 1 month to 3 months, people can get infected again. And then 3 months to 6 months, everyone starts to wane. And then after 6 months, everyone will be able to get it for a second time. So I'm saying to these people, if you're just going to get it now, what about in 6 weeks from now? Are you just going to get it again? And then are you just going to get it again? Or if you're not going to get it for a second time, like if you're going to protect yourself, why don't you just protect yourself from getting it the first time? So I don't know. This is the life I'm trying to live right now, Radar. Vaccinated, boosted, and wear a mask.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, look, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
Went out to the theatre the other day. People with their masks in the queue, and then as soon as they got into the theatre, they all took their masks off. And I was like, oh, how's this going to help? But look, and there is nothing to say that there's going to be a variant that comes through, and it is going to really whomp through people. But they're now saying, is it 1 in 3 could have some form of long COVID?
Yeah.
And that long-term health problems are going to be the new pandemic, and they're looking at that really strongly in the States and in Europe as well. So, just because you get it doesn't mean, you're going to be fine.
There was some research that came out that we've shared in the show, like previous weeks, saying that even a mild case of Omicron can cause as much damage to the brain as 10 years of aging. So, there are good reasons not to get it if at all avoidable. So even though I've rallied against this a bit on the show, I've had some idiot people that I've interacted with who won't take protections and then got it. I'm like, if you take the precautions that you need and you get it, no one can ask you to do any more. But people who take undue risks and get it and then pass it on to someone else, that's the thing. Schools at the moment that are not enforcing masks, two of my kids are at 2 different schools at the moment that aren't enforcing masks. My kids are wearing masks, and I'm not trying to be, look at my kids, they're amazing, but I trust that they are. I learned the one who had a sore throat last week, I learned that they're keeping them inside for lunchtime. So in other words, she wears a mask during the day. She takes it off at lunchtime and sits around all the kids who aren't wearing a mask, and then she comes home with a sore throat. So it's just like, if this is the rule, right? Live your life, get boosted, wear a fucking mask. That's it. That's all we can do to protect ourselves. And if we all do that, we will minimize masks, especially in N95, are between 57 and 85% effective of keeping you away from COVID altogether. Wear a mask, get boosted, live your life. That's it.
Had your flu shot?
I haven't, but I'm going to this year. I never get one, but I'm going to get one this year.
Yep.
I never get one because I've never.
You never get one.
But I know I've never had one, but it's not. It's only because I have been that person who's been a bit lethargic about it. But I'm like, I've never really had the flu. I've never really had a really bad one. It's fine. But I'm definitely getting it this year, and I will consider getting another booster as well.
At what point this evening do we bring in an uplifting story that makes us all want to go on living our best lives?
How about this one? How about you get an EV and you get an EV and everyone gets an EV? Should we talk about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's talk about this EV deal that the government's going to announce. I was talking, I think because I was doing some research, I was talking to Tesla today, the New Zealand subsidiaries of Tesla, just to have a bit of a chat about what they were doing. And the guy always said to me, "Oh, so when's this?" Like, he was a young fellow who's obviously a salesman, and I'd done a lot of research on this announcement. He's like, "When's the announcement going to be made?" And I said, "Well, they're going to make it in the budget, but I think what they'll probably do, the government, is I think they'll probably start it next year." Because if they start it like 6 months out from the election, then it's a run into the election, or they'll start it just after the election. So they'll be saying, if you want an EV, if you want us to help you in the car, National's not going to do it, ACT's not going to do it, then you have to put us back in power. So, so that's the conversation from today. But we're starting to learn a little bit more about what the details of the scheme from the government is. And here's a few headlines for you to help us figure out who's going to be potentially eligible. Just the early stages. I'm sure more details will come.
Families and individuals eligible will have to earn less than the median household income, around $85,000. Vehicles in line for the scrap heap will need to be 8 years or older. You'll get about 10 grand to trade in your car. You can use this to buy a zero or low emissions vehicle like a hybrid or an e-bike, and these can be second-hand. Not everyone's on board. ACT says Kiwis should instead get a $1,000 tax refund from the emissions trading scheme, which will fund this plan.
We think solving climate change is simple.
The simple suggestion that MPs simply spend less time in Wellington because less travel to the capital means fewer emissions.
Would you put your money in your bums where your mouths are?
The ACT Party is now proposing climate change policies so that they can pretend that they're not climate deniers whilst also pretending that they are.
So there you go. So that's the basic announcement. Less than $85,000. If your car's more than 8 years old, you can get 10 grand. Now, to be honest with you, they need to offer more. I mean, I'm driving a big gas guzzling SUV at the moment. When I moved to Dunedin, I wanted to get a 4-wheel drive, and it's comfortable, but it's terrible. It's 13 years old. It's still worth about 12 grand. Like, its Blue Book is about 12 grand. And so why would I get it crushed by the government for 10 grand when it's one of exactly the car that should go off the road, where I could sell it for 12? Now, that means the objective of putting it into the crusher has not been achieved. So I hope some, because I mean, I would love to do this. I've been rallying for the last 6 months about wanting to get into an EV. I'd be first in the queue, but it still has to work financially.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what price are they at the moment. Like, are the second-hand market, has it just sort of gone? Are there enough? Can they make enough? Like, if everyone's going into EVs, can they literally make enough?
Well, China has a really good market
here?
of EVs at the moment, and I think what they're doing is producing a huge number of really low-cost ones. If you want to get like, for example, talking to Tesla again today, I asked about the Model Y and I asked about the Model 3. Model Y is going to be there's nothing planned for the Model Y yet for coming to New Zealand. It's £55,000, which means it'll probably be $125,000. The Model 3 is under 80. The government subsidy at the moment of about 8 grand has to be on an EV that's under $80,000. And to get a brand new EV under $80,000, you're obviously getting entry specs. If you're like me and you live somewhere where it snows, for example, you kind of want 4-wheel drive, yet you'll get no EV that's 4-wheel drive for under 80 grand. So, there's some tweaking that needs to be done, but, and then also there needs to be a way for, I mean, if they're talking about low income people, if your family's earning less than $85,000, let's call that, so let's say they're earning $1,500 a week. What's that? $1,200 a week after tax, $1,000 a week after tax. How much of that can actually go towards paying for a vehicle? Like, how are you going to get that low income family out of their 1999 Toyota Starlet or whatever it is, worth $2 grand, and then say, well, you can get into this EV now. It's worth $70,000. It's going to cost you $200 a week, but we'll make that $180 a week because we're going to take 10 grand off the price. So we need more information.
And then where are they going to park it to charge it?
Yeah,
there's a lot of infrastructural issues to go in. So there's no a lot of places now being built with no parking, no on-street parking, no off-street parking. So, you know, when is that grid needs to go into enable people to charge. You don't want to just run an extension cord out your window and all the way down the street and around the corner and through Bob's section and plug it into your car where you've managed to get a car park up the street.
Bob's a pretty good guy, though. I'm sure he'll be fine with that.
He is a good guy, but people do like stealing extension cords.
I think if you look in places where they're really successful but don't have off-street parking, like in London and in Germany, what their infrastructure is they've put power points and power boxes into the external light poles in the street.
What
So
a
they put
great
boxes
idea.
into so there's but you're right. But that requires a huge amount of investment in infrastructure. You know, where I live in the world, it's a 4-hour drive in each direction, Queenstown or Christchurch. I looked at an EV today that had a 376 kilometer range. Now that's a factory range. That probably means 300 kilometers. That's not going to get me to either of them. So somewhere between Dunedin and Queenstown, Dunedin and Wanaka, and also Dunedin and Christchurch, there needs to be at least one fast charging station. And when 30% of the cars on the road are going to be electric, there probably needs to be 15 or 20 actual, you know, charges at that. You can't have one and a carload of 40 people everyone waiting for that one charger. So there's a lot still to understand about this.
But then the argument is that if you are going to go and do a journey like that, you would, and I've seen this argument, you would rent a car capable of going those distances, you know, a petrol car or something like that, or you would take some form of public transport, which does not currently exist. The other thing they're doing at the moment, you whoop in and your battery drops out. Robots do it, and then they slip a new battery in. Off you go.
Yeah, no, and that's
Done.
true. And I think the other thing though about this is that if you buy, for example, a Tesla or a Ford Lightning or whatever, they have 500, 600 kilometers range, but they're also $150,000. So the cars that they're talking about for low-income families to get into are going to be the entry-level ones. They're going to be the two-wheel ones. They're going to be the short-range ones. They're not an extended range one. So again, is it worth a low-income family having a nicer car with no emissions that they have to charge at home overnight, but doesn't have the range to get them to see their whānau up in Northland or in Christchurch or whatever? Or is it worth them just staying in their gas guzzler, which is expensive to run, but when they do want to go to Christchurch or they do want to go to Taupo or whatever from Auckland, they can get there.
Yeah. What's the low hanging fruit? You know,
I think that
commutes.
I think that I don't know. I mean, no GST. Take the GST. It's 15% off $70,000. There's another 10. Take the GST off. So you could eat. So if they're going to give 10 grand for your car, if there's already an 8 grand subsidy, and then they take the GST off, there's 25 grand. Your $70,000 cars, 45 straight away.
You just see the kind of laws of supply and demand that make the price goes higher and higher. I don't know.
But if you're buying new cars,
these are complex problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we haven't solved them quite yet, Radar.
Oh, look, no.
Anywho. Well, you said, is there anything good news that we can talk about to leave people with? Is there anything you want to share with us? Personal, professional?
Yeah, they're getting the soldiers out of the steelworks. Looks like they're evacuating them out, and those guys have been stuck in that steel. Like, if there is nothing that sums up this year more, Russians battling Ukrainians in a steelworks. It's 1942 all over again. So the good news that I saw today was that those guys and far out. You know, and I could not comprehend what it must have been like to have been in that steelworks for all of those months there, and then suddenly you're on a bus, you've been driven off, hoping that you're going to be swapped for some other prisoners. That's
I'm surprised that Ukraine has become so low on the totem pole of stories at the moment. You know, for the first 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks, it was number one. Everyone was talking about, including us. And now I haven't talked about Ukraine for a month. 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh,
it just hasn't been a conversation each. Yeah, well, and I haven't done it, and so it's something that I've been looking at for this week that we want to re-include. But I think one of the important things we all need to do is not forget about what's happening over there, because it could turn into a 5-year occupation that no one thinks about or talks about. It's still very active, and we need to keep it in the forefront of our mind, I think.
Yes, indeed. I don't know whether you saw some of the coverage of some of the parties that are contesting the election down in Tauranga. I really hope someone's making a doco about that. There was just a small Twitter thread from someone with the name Mungbean, I think, in their handle. They went to one of the meetings, with the fringe candidates, and it was just a cavalcade of bonkersness. So that's still going on as well. Entertain yourselves.
I did enjoy Christopher Luxon talking about diversity, and then that image going around Twitter of the 4 white men going for Simon Bridges. But one of them I remember one of them had a brown belt on. So the brown belt was a little bit of diversity.
Yeah. The best one I saw for that was someone had that photo and the little caption was 4 mild butter chickens, please.
Hey, Radar, thank you for joining us. We had a bit of a balls up at the start. That kind of threw me, if I'm honest, for a little bit. I needed to come back in, and unfortunately, our guest tonight, Dr. James Holling, we had a bit of a technical issue there as well. But I think the rest of the show moved along and got along, and
technically fine.
Yeah.
But look, isn't it amazing? If you want some good news, look what we can do these days. We're not beholden to these big broadcasters who steal people's stories. We can put the stuff out. There's people who want to see it. There's an audience out there, and we can chat about all of these bits of things, and there's a voice to people. More people, more voices. I don't know whether that's necessarily a good thing. But
I think that there's like everything. I think every cloud has a silver lining, but what I think we forget is every silver lining also has a cloud. People forget the opposite is also true of that. And there's that old adage that, unfortunately, things like social media and Twitter gave some people the impression that what they've got to say is important and valued because they can now spread it to the world. But I think that more good voices should always be valued. And I don't mean good as in agree with any one person, but more quality voices and more informed voices and more educated voices, not being a snob about it, but and more interesting voices and more fun voices and more funny voices and, more positive impact on society voices.
Bit of curation, everyone.
Yeah. That sounds like
have a winter is coming. The days are getting cooler. You're going to find your times inside. Go through and curate your social media feeds.
Yeah.
All right, the library of the now. Goodbye.
We're going to wrap it up, Radar. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thanks for being with us. And this big shout out to George, my producer, who is under the weather at the moment. I won't talk about what's going on with him because he's just a bit sick, but he's under the weather at the moment. And I think we probably won't see George again for those of you who know what we do and know the product until next week. But for the rest of you who are just joining us, I haven't said this tonight, we are running this all this week at 10 p.m. We normally run at midday or 11 a.m., but we're trying new times. And we'll be back tomorrow night with Chewy Bennett, who's a local Dunedin comedian, as the co-host, talking about the big, hairy news issues of the day. And thank you for joining us. And thank you, Radar. All the best, my friend. Lovely to see you.